right, and thank you for joining us. We're going to say good morning to
Neil Cavuto. Whoa!
It is very early. It's very, very early. I admire how you guys do that. All right. Thank you very, very much, guys. We are following on a couple of developments here, and very happy to have you. I am Neil Cavuto, in for my colleague and friend Maria Bottaromo. We're going to be getting very big news coming on the retail sector. Home Depot kicking things off. We'll get to that in a second. I should also tell you that things have stabilized when it comes to Turkey. Now, that's sort of a perspective on just the free fall has stopped. That doesn't take away the fact that the currency has been cut in half, if you think about it, in little more than a couple of weeks. So we'll be on top of that and the fallout. But for the futures, for the European markets, for the Asian markets, they welcome these developments because the beating has, for the moment, stopped. That doesn't mean that the beating will not resume down the road. For now, the markets are seizing on this as a promising development. We should also say that these contagion fears are still real no matter what is happening. We're following on that, the effects it could have on markets as far-flung as South Africa and Argentina, Brazil, you name it. They're all caught in the mix. Here with me today, Fox contributor Katherine Timpf. We've got the Wall Street Journal Global Economics editor, John Hilsenrath, and CFRA investment strategist, Lindsey Bell. Lindsey, begin with you first on your concerns about what's been happening with Turkey. A little bit of stability today. Maybe Home Depot saves a day in just a second, but what do you make of it?
The stability today is an encouraging development for sure. But like you said, the lira is down almost 50% year to date. That's a little bit shocking, especially for this type of country. But the issue here is that their country, they don't have government debt. They have debt that is coming from other countries and it is valued in the dollar. And as the dollar rises, this is a problem. At CFRA, we reduced our exposure to emerging markets earlier this year because interest rates were rising. The dollar was expected to rise. So that was an area we wanted to move away from. But, you know, if you look at the overall, the Wall Street Journal, John, love to hear your thoughts too, has a great article in there this morning too about how even though the fall that we've seen so far, the valuations of the debt and the equity markets are not at these very deep discounted levels. So theoretically, the story of the emerging markets may not entirely be over, although it has come down.
You know, they were just looking for that pause, right? At least something.
Well, when you get these emerging market crises, they tend to come in pulses, and then you can have things stabilize for a few days. But it doesn't mean by any stretch that Turkey's problems are finished. You know, as you said, they have all this U.S. dollar debt. They have all the earmarks of an emerging market crisis. A lot of U.S. dollar debt, a falling currency, large current account deficits.
And by the way, we're stating the obvious here, but the more currency tumbles against the dollar in this case, the more it's going to take to, you know, get out of that hole. So
right, and
that stronger dollar just makes it more of a hole.
We were talking about this yesterday. The next shoe to drop is the banks, because the banks are exposed. You know, when interest rates rise, and we're seeing interest rates rise a lot in Turkey when the currency falls, loans go bad, and you start to see banks destabilize. So that's where I'm looking next.
And this is a 180 from what it was, right? I mean, when times are good, the banks were loaning to anyone, and you know,
and that's what gets them in all the trouble.
That's what's complicated things, right?
Yeah. And then, the other thing to look at is, does this spill over into any other markets? You mentioned in the opening South Africa. You have to be a little bit worried about. Argentina just got a big IMF loan to stabilize its economy and its financial markets. Maybe Brazil, Russia. But, you know, when you look at a lot of Turkey's problems are unique to Turkey, especially this fight that they've got going on right now with the United States over this American pastor. So it's possible that this is just a Turkish problem. By
the way, if they released Pastor Andrew Brunson, problems go away or no?
No, they have fundamental economic problems. They have, as I said, they've got destabilized banking system.
But our tariffs would stop, right? Our tariffs would presumably stop.
Well, so it could help them stabilize things a little bit because, you know, who knows, maybe the president would reverse he just doubled the tariffs. Maybe he'd go back to where they were a few weeks ago. They certainly would stop tightening the screws on the country. So that would give Erdogan a little bit more breathing room. But it doesn't sound like he's going to respond.
Which is going to hurt the Turkey even more, and that's going to be a major problem. But
what if he were released today?
if he were to
released today, if the pastor were released today, and that was the reason with the president doubled those tariffs on, you know, aluminum and metal related products.
Yeah, I think that would be a positive sign for the country, but I think that the issues have been building the concerns here for quite some time now. So I don't think that the story is over. It'll be a little bit of a relief rally perhaps in the lira, but I think that they have bigger problems to deal with.
You know, Neil, whenever we've written over the past few years about spasms in emerging markets, whether it be Argentina or some other country, and we start looking at what countries could be next, Turkey was always at the top of the list. We were always talking about the economic fundamentals just weren't in good shape there. One of the problems there is the way they deal, the way they manage the central bank. There's no central bank independence. A lot of concerns. Inflation is exceptionally high in Turkey. A lot of concerns there. The central bank let the currency go.
So I'm curious, like what potentially saves the day? Home Depot is out with numbers that beat estimates right now, so that could be a catalyst or a good development, right? I mean, we've been looking at retail as a sign of what the individual consumer is doing. I don't know whether a Home Depot shopper is analogous to a Nordstrom shopper and a Macy's shopper and a Walmart shopper, but that's been the backdrop for the president, right? That's been his position of strength.
Right, and you know what? Last year at this time, the whole market really assumed that retail was just dead. This story was completely over, and it's been revitalized. Starting in the fourth quarter of last year, Home Depot this morning beat on top and bottom lines. Very impressive. They had a weaker first quarter report, and that was because of weather. You know, you hate to blame the weather, but the gardening business was really slow. So I suspect, I haven't seen all the details here, but I'm guessing the gardening business was able to pick up with better weather. And we're really expecting the retailers to do well this quarter, because spending has rebounded significantly in the second quarter after taking a little bit of a break in the first quarter. You've got GDP 4.1% in the second quarter. Unemployment is at such low levels. Confidence is high. It's really just the perfect storm for retail right now, even though these stocks, if you look at the S&P 500 retail index, it's up over 30% year to date, much better.
As are earnings in the aggregate. I mean, they're up appreciably. I think they're running at close to a 25% clip over last year. That's a lot stronger than people thought it would be.
Exactly. And, you know, it's going to continue through the second half of the year. Numbers have actually remained stable, and that was something that was a concern with tariffs and different things, geopolitical concerns on the forefront. But the numbers have been steady and going up, actually.
You know, one of the big themes the last few years has been the death of retail because of Amazon and online shopping. And one of the surprises this year is that retail is hanging in there. You mentioned all these earnings numbers, but when you look at the employment numbers, one of the fastest growing sectors for hiring right now is retail. It's really surprising. Retail and manufacturing are the two biggest employers for hiring. And you know, the other thing I'd say is we have retail sales data coming out.
It's true.
In addition to all these earnings numbers, tomorrow retail sales data are coming out. So we'll see.
I don't think there's a better barometer on the mood of the consumer than whether he or she is shopping, right? And I'm wondering, when you talk to your friends and all, you know, you're very cheap. I know that when you go out, Kat. But people are more predisposed to buy than they've been in many a year, and I'm wondering what you make of that.
I think that there is very high consumer confidence, but I am surprised about the brick and mortar stores actually doing decently well, because I haven't gone to a store to buy a thing in probably years. Even like toilet paper, paper towel, I get that all delivered via Amazon Prime. I don't like to leave my apartment, probably more than the average bear, so I guess some people might go to the store occasionally.
Do you physically go to any store?
I don't. I get absolutely everything delivered to my apartment. Unless I have to try on shoes. I'll try on shoes, and then I'll leave the store and buy them online for cheaper.
But, you know, it's people are, I'm not saying they're shopping with abandon, but they're, you know, through all the vagaries and the crises and the, you know, the Turkish disruptions and then the trade tariff disruptions, one constant has been the consumer.
Yeah, no, it absolutely has been true. And I think part of the thing, too, is with the brick and mortar stores that they've been building out their direct-to-consumer or their online businesses. And you'll see, we'll probably hear that through some of the second quarter earnings, that they're still investing in it, and that there's worry that that might impact margins a little bit. But the consumer is feeling good, and they are shopping. And that has definitely been the bedrock of this economy.
And they also have money in their pockets because they're withholding, the government is withholding less from their paychecks for taxes because of the tax cuts last year.
You know, this is the position the president has bragged about, has been the wind at his back, and that if you're going to go into a trade war, he doesn't call it a trade war, but if you're going to go into a fight, this is a position you want to be in. Do you guys buy that?
Well, you know, the economy is strong right now, so he is negotiating from a position of strength. The only thing, sorry to be a nervous Nelly, but
you do have that reputation.
But we're building up very large budget deficits. We're talking about trillion-dollar budget deficits, and things feel good right now. Let's talk again in 2020.
But we've been building those up for quite a few years. Right?
Nobody's
Well,
ever
they were coming down, actually. When Republicans were in charge of Congress, they pushed the Obama administration to squeeze spending. So as a percent of GDP, deficits were coming down, but they're going back up. It's unprecedented how
What do you
large
blame
they
that
are.
on? I've heard some blame it on the tax cuts. Others ignore the spending component of that. I mean,
Right. This Congress and this White House just increased, did a big increase in government spending. And some of this stuff wanes in 2020, 21.
because it was your paper, if memory serves me right, that pointed out that revenues from those tax cuts have been actually a pleasant surprise.
Well, they were in June, but they were in May, I think, but in June and July they softened a little bit.
So you're not a believer yet?
No.
You're challenging your own newspaper?
No,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We reported what was the case in May, but it was just 1 month. The last couple months have been soft on the revenue side.
Do you think those tax cuts are something that is explaining what's going on at Home Depot, explaining what could be going on at Walmart and Macy's and Dillard's and Nordstrom and all these other numbers that are due out in the next few days, that has really fueled all of this?
I think it depends on the person. I think that for some people that was a lot more money than it was for other people. I think for a lot of people that it does make the difference. It was a huge chunk of change compared to what they're used to having. But at the same time, it does bother me that we did tax cuts without spending cuts. Because I remember when Republicans were supposed to be the fiscally conservative party and always talking about the debt and the deficit, and now it just turns out that they're adding to the deficit in different ways, which I'd certainly rather have a tax cut than more entitlement programs, have everyone keep more of their own money. But it is something that we need to be concerned about at some point.
We did tax cuts with spending increases.
Right.
We did the worst. Yeah. I do find it odd, though, when we focus on the battle over taxes and spending and all this, that, I think this budget has, almost $12 trillion in extra spending added to the debt in the next 10 years. And yet everyone makes a big deal over the $1.5 to $1.75 trillion in tax cuts and the revenue there, and not something that's 10 times larger on spending.
I agree with you. I think you make a very good point, and you should continue to make that point on air. But it is a concern because as the Fed is going to raise interest rates, that's going to become a major problem. But right now, you're seeing the 10-year, it's staying below 3%, which has been kind of crazy. And so the market doesn't really have, or individuals don't really have any reason to get too concerned yet. And that's why I think people are really just avoiding this topic.
So, Lindsey, you mentioned the Fed. The other thing that we have to look out for is relations between the White House and the Fed over the next couple of years. Not only, and the president has tweeted about this, about his discomfort.
Absolutely.
With the Fed raising interest rates, but not only does it slow.
He's not the first president to express frustration. He's just publicly stated it, right?
Right. And, Lyndon Johnson famously, poked his finger at Fed chairman and said, you can't, you're hurting my war effort. But the worry here, I think, for the president is not only could it slow the economy, but it makes it even more expensive to finance all this debt that we're building.
That reminds me, guys, and I know we have to cut the break here pretty soon, but when you look at, let's say, Home Depot is not a trend for the entire retail industry. I hasten to add that. But if you're sitting at the Federal Reserve, you're looking at yet another piece of evidence that shows the economy picking up steam, people with abandon going out and buying things, willy-nilly. Does that confirm your view that you have to keep raising rates?
I think it's more, they're going to look to inflation, which we saw has been ticking up. And they do believe that there will be some one-off periods or months that you'll see inflation above their 2% target, the core inflation number, which we saw in the most recent reading. But I think based on that, they're going to act accordingly. The market right now is expecting 2 rate hikes at the end of this year. And I think that will continue. 2 more
this year.
Yep.
That's still baked into the case. You agree with that, John?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they go to 2.5 or 3%, and then they see how inflation is developing, and if
2.5 or 3% on the overnight bank lending rate.
Right.
Okay.
And then they see how inflation is developing, and if it's continuing to rise, they maybe they keep going. But I think the plan right now is to keep going into next year to 2.5 and 3%, and it's going to be really interesting to watch the president's Twitter account to see how frustrated he's getting with those rate increases.
Yeah, because it starts to wonder why why you're destroying a good thing. You know, Kat, we talk about sentiment and people's moods improving. When you talk to people, when you do sneak out of your apartment, are you getting any vibes from your friends, colleagues that, you know, something good could be going on here? I think I'm going to buy more. I think I'm going to do more. You know, the kind of stuff that we've had false starts prior, but this seems to be a consistent pattern.
Absolutely. A lot more shopping, a lot more vacations. It seems actually looking at Instagram every now and then that certain of my friends are literally always on vacation. Do you have any people like that you know that are just always posting from Bora Bora? It's like, okay, don't you have a job? But yeah, I absolutely do think that there's higher confidence right now.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to get sort of the latest on what's happening right now in Turkey, where at least for the time being, calmer, cooler heads are prevailing. In the meantime, we'll give you the latest on this apparent car crash outside Parliament in London. No one is calling this a terrorist incident. In fact, few are characterizing it any which way. But it has happened again, raised concerns again, and a lot of people are getting nervous again. It's not being reflected in the markets, certainly, but we're on top of it. More after this. All right, we're still trying to find out more about this car that rammed a barrier at the British Parliament. Cheryl Casone has much more on this. Cheryl, what happened?
Well, it's very interesting, Neil. This all happened overnight out of London. At this stage, Scotland Yard not calling it a terror attack, but they're treating the incident as terrorism. They've arrested the driver of the vehicle. They say he drove through a crowd of pedestrians and then crashed into a gate just outside of Parliament, as you mentioned. Several were injured. Streets in the surrounding area cordoned off. And the nearby Westminster Underground tube station has been closed. The area, the site of a terror attack back in March of 2017 when Khalid Massoud plowed a car into crowds on Westminster Bridge. You may remember that. 4 people died in that incident. We're, of course, going to provide more information as we get it out of our Fox London bureau this morning. Well, here at home, voters in 4 states are heading to the polls today. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Vermont, and Connecticut are holding primaries. In Wisconsin, President Trump's call for a boycott of Harley-Davidson has forced Governor Scott Walker and other Republicans to either criticize the president or stick with the Milwaukee-based company. 8 Democrats are vying to challenge Walker. And in Minnesota, Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison has been accused of emotionally and physically abusing his ex-girlfriend. He is running for the state's attorney general spot. He has several opponents in that race. Now, one of the 4 Vermont Democrats seeking the party nomination for governor isn't even old enough to vote. Meet 14-year-old Ethan Sonneborn. He does not meet the requirements to be on the primary. Actually, he does meet the requirements to be on the ballot because his parents allowed him to do so. He's taken his place with the state's more age-appropriate candidates. The state constitution doesn't have an age requirement for people seeking the state's highest office. He's taken full advantage.
I think my campaign transcends age. I want people to think of me as a pragmatic progressive who happens to be 14.
He's 14. Ethan has raised just over $1,700. Unfortunately, not enough to make him competitive. And yes, his parents had to allow him to get on the ballot. Okay, and then finally we're going to end with this, Neil. Check out the price of Bitcoin, the digital currency falling below $6,000 for the first time since June. At one point, trading just about $5,800. Nearly every other cryptocurrency under pressure this morning. Digital currencies, of course, rallied last month on hopes that new investors would be attracted to a Bitcoin-backed ETF, but the SEC has postponed a decision, Neil, on the phone. Remember when Bitcoin was 20,000?
Wow. I
can't imagine that we questioned that at the time.
You know, I'm curious about this kid in Vermont, not only because he looks like I did, I'd say, but why is everyone laughing? If he gets elected, he can be governor?
He's legally on the ballot, yes. His parents had to sign off, but he is legally on the ballot.
Wow.
Yeah, would the legal community in the state have something to say about it? Possibly.
Yeah, all right, well. It's Vermont. All right, thank you very, very much. I always learned something, Cheryl, from your updates. We're on top of that. We're also on top of another company on the verge of hitting $1 trillion market cap. In fact, they're lining up like planes at LaGuardia right now. Amazon could be the next. We're on it after this. right, after Apple, Amazon, it could happen. $1 trillion in market value, maybe sooner than you think. Lauren Simonetti is here. Lauren, good to see you back. Well, I haven't had the pleasure.
Good to see you. Welcome back to you as well, Neil.
Thank you.
Amazon will be a $1 trillion company because the share price only has to go up 7%, and they, too, join Apple in the $1 trillion club. Forrester Research out with the note, and they say, look, Amazon's actually better than Apple because consumers like Amazon more. You know, it's true. You have your iPhone, you have your Apple TV or
Amazon
something.
is the only reason I'm still alive.
You're good with that, but with Amazon, they just keep selling to you, whether it's Alexa or a hardware or your, you know, your diapers, whatever you buy on Amazon. They are in so many different branches. So Amazon should be next if you look at the latest numbers at the market capitalizations of the big tech stocks. So Apple at $1 trillion, Amazon right now at $940 billion, Google, Alphabet, $875 billion. And look at Microsoft, $840 billion.
Sneaking up there.
It has been sneaking up. Where's Facebook in all of this? Well, $524 billion is their market capitalization. So we are seeing, in some senses, a differentiation between the tech companies. Not so popular among investors right now are the tech companies that are very reliant on advertising dollars. Hence, Facebook not as popular as some of the others at this point.
You know
in the
what's
game.
interesting about that, too? There used to be a time, right, in the frenetic, go-go, late 90s internet zeal, that you invested on promise, not profit, because they didn't have to make money. All of those names make money.
Now, yeah.
So is it different now?
I think so. I mean, Amazon, they've really, they're using the AWS cloud business to fund the retail and other businesses and their other ventures. They're getting their hand in everything. Yes, healthcare. So, I mean, I think Amazon, their growth opportunities are probably much more significant than Apple's.
And they're taking over the world.
Totally different than the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, in the 90s, almost anyone could IPO. All you needed was an idea and a few connections on Wall Street, and you were IPOing. Now the market is really dominated by just a few big companies, you know, Amazon, Apple. It's really interesting to see Microsoft on there, though. Microsoft has really reinvented itself.
Completely.
You know, we don't depend on Microsoft Office the way we used to, but they've managed to keep themselves relevant in a very fast-changing environment.
But I was noticing they all have a great reliance and very viable business on the cloud, you know, up there. And I always wonder where is all this stuff?
It's in the cloud.
In the cloud.
It's in the cloud.
It's a very good name for it.
I spend $2.99 a month for my cloud of pictures.
But do you know how to actually access it? Do you know how to actually access it?
No, but my husband does, so we're good.
Okay,
Do it.
Soon your kids will as well. Yeah.
It's in these data farms in like Utah and stuff. That's where it's actually on the ground. But
that was the reason for Microsoft's turnaround, right?
I don't know. I know I have stuff in there, but how do I ever see it? I'm spending the $2.99 too. I don't know why.
Well, maybe you just got to get out of your apartment and say that. You know what's weird about it, though? John, you were mentioning this idea that it's different from the late 1990s and that, you know, these are all money-making ventures and have a very clear business model, but are they rich to you, even allowing for that?
Well, some of them do have high multiples, Amazon being one, Netflix being another. But if you look at technology overall, the multiple, it's at about 19 times. By historical standards, it's not too bad. The average for the tech space in the 90s, when things were getting a little out of control, was about 60 times. So we're pretty far from that for most of the sector. And you're actually seeing breadth across the tech sector. So everyone cites these large mega cap companies and that they've done significantly well. But you're also starting to see some of these smaller, lesser known companies that don't get the headlines and the media attention do well.
Right. Well, Lindsey, a lot of these multiples have come down in the last several quarters in particular because we've had such good earnings.
Such a pullback.
Numbers.
Same thing happened earlier this year. You had the pullback in the tech sector. It was a great turned out to be a great time to get in. And I think that's what happened after, you know, the big Facebook user debacle and some of the Netflix.
Do you think the market has another big run after the midterms? You know, it had a big run after the presidential election. Is it gearing up for another big run after these midterms are out of the way?
Well, historically, that has been the case. The 12 months after the midterm election, you see the market go up about 16% on average in the next 12 months. It's just, it goes back to the question. We all know the market can't handle uncertainty. So when you have certainty re-enter the market, we know who's going to be in charge of Congress for the next couple of years.
But does that apply even when the market, like the case of the S&P's had a 6 or 7% run up ahead of that?
Yes, I do
Really?
believe so. Yeah.
Okay. That's why.
But you never have certainty with Donald Trump in office, so.
Right, there's
That
other
is
things.
You
might not
ever
work
have
this year.
certainty. The uncertainty just changes from one thing to
Yes.
another.
Right.
So.
You are so going to get a nasty tweet from the president now. All right, we have a lot more coming up here. Lauren, I want to thank you very, very much for that here. You know, just when it looks like Turkey situations can't get worse, along comes an idea to kick it out of NATO because of how it's acting. That should help after this. Good morning, everybody. Happy to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto in for my colleague and friend Maria Bartiromo. We are trying to keep you abreast of what seems to be calming markets worldwide because Turkey isn't free falling anymore. Not that it's soaring, it's just stopped falling. That doesn't mean that it can't fall again, but the futures seem to like it. The foreign markets in Europe and in Asia all seem to like it. The question is how long it will last. We should add here that very, very quickly that the Turkish Central Bank has brought a number of measures here meant to stabilize things, limiting how much currency you could take out of the country, how much you could exchange for dollars, et cetera. The idea to put some sort of a Band-Aid on all of this, and that's all it might be. But we are seeing the markets respond favorably to these developments and rumors, and I should stress rumors in the Financial Times and elsewhere, that the pastor at the center of this fight with the United States, Andrew Bunton, in fact could be released. No one is saying one way or the other whether that is likely, just that it has been held out there that President Erdogan might do that just to get the pressure of those tariffs, doubling in metals tariffs, off his back from President Donald Trump. We shall see. Meanwhile, speaking of President Trump, he signed that Defense Authorization Act as expected yesterday.
The National Defense Authorization Act is the most significant investment in our military and our warfighters in modern history, and I am very proud to be a big, big part of it.
And it is a big, big number, better than $716 billion, almost $725 billion if you tie in a lot of ancillary contracts and all of that. General Jack Keane likes that. He joins us out of Washington. General, what do you think?
Well, it's a step in the right direction. This is the second installment in what I and many describe as the Trump defense buildup, which is comparable to what Ronald Reagan did. But we got to get out of a hole that we've been in for a decade plus, with defense budgets not being what they should be. We're still the primary military in the world, but the fact is that our capabilities have eroded significantly over time, and Russia and China in certain highly specialized areas have been able to catch us, and in certain other areas they've actually gone past us, and we are in a big power competition with them. So we need several years of this. There'll be members of Congress that don't want to do that, that's for sure, and this is going to have to be argued, but this is sort of a down payment, and we need to sustain it.
You know, it comes at a time, though, when we have been demanding, as if you've been on this show and others talking a great deal about NATO paying its fair share, NATO countries paying their fair share. We pay over 70% of the cost of keeping our colleagues safe there. Now there's talk about building a space force to add to that. Are we ready for that? Do we have the money and the commitment for that?
Well, the issue with space certainly is that the United States has dominated space for years, but now our adversaries are all up there with us, and that's the reality that we're facing. And space will be a part of any conflict operation. Actually, it may be where the first shot gets fired, because if you take out our satellites drive not only GPS location, they drive all of our communications, and they drive our weapons telemetry. It is what enables us to bring a precision munition to a target within about 25 meters with a degree of reliability of about 95 to 98%. So we can't operate without space, and we got to be able to control it. All that said, Neil, I'm not certain we need a new service to be able to do that, because when you create a service, you're buying into all the layers of bureaucracy that go with that service. What we really need is a command focused on space, like we got a special operations command that focuses on the needs of our special forces and those kind of specialized troops. We had problems not resourcing those for years, and the Congress said, hey, stop it. We're gonna tell you to form a specialized command so you give you the priority it deserves. I think that's the right answer. The Senate Armed Services Committee has said pretty much the same thing. Let's not spend the extra dollars on the bureaucracy. Let's spend the money on the capability.
Yeah, our history suggests that we don't, start a whole new agency. We just add it to the ones that we've got. Well, I've got you, General. We're getting word now of this incident in London where a driver tried to ram pedestrians outside Parliament. Now he has been charged with terrorism, and there are growing concerns that it could have happened again. What do you make of this?
Well, this is certainly the pattern that's been established. These things are almost impossible to stop unless you've got intelligence that leads up to it. If he's operating by himself and he's not in the network and he decides to do this on a particular day, thank God there was no explosives in the vehicle, which would have made it considerably worse. But these are challenges that where every major city is going to continue to face, where the terrorists have their eye on trying to undermine that government and make a name for what they're doing and for their cause.
I always wonder, and I don't mean to sort of say the markets are the epicenter of everything, but they used to get really rattled on these type of reports. Not so much these days, and maybe in the last couple of years, it could be sadly we're used to this sort of thing or have a better sort of a big picture view of it, and we move on with our lives. But what do you make of that? I'm not saying they're nonplussed, but they move on to other things. Are they too cavalier? What do you think?
No, I don't think so at all. I think it's largely a reflection, of societies writ large. I mean, the people sort of get it. And, they live in a major urban center. There's millions of people there. The likelihood of their being touched by something like this is pretty remote. They feel they can go on with their lives, get their kids to school, work hard, recreate when they want to. I mean, the rest of this day will be normal in London, except for that one area where this took place at. I mean, so I think the media is a bit of a reflection of the people, and so is the government. And I think there's a trust that these governments and these police forces are working overtime to try to stop these things and use the intel collaboration that exists out there. Everybody's sort of focused on this. So I think there's some trust that's built up also among the population. And I do think it's a reflection of the maturity of a society being able to cope with some evil that's in it and recognizing the fact that you're never going to be able to stamp it all out anyway.
It's a good point. General, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Turkey. We know the economic impact and all that, but there was a move afoot to say that Erdogan is power hungry. The president there has actually planted the seeds for this financial disaster that is now reverberating worldwide, less so today. And there are some advocating, you know what, you don't deserve to be in NATO. What if we kick them out? What would be the impact of that?
No, that would be a huge strategic mistake. Listen, we've had almost a 7-year relationship with Turkey being a part of NATO. They're the second largest military in NATO. They sit at the strategic crossroads between Europe and the Middle East. And we should not make a decision on the policies of one leader who is going to serve for a certain period of time. And yes, he's more authoritarian. He stripped away democratic values in that country. He's aggravating us significantly over Syria as he's moved closer to Russia and to Iran. And he certainly got our president's attention when he imprisoned an American citizen who resides in Turkey on false charges. So, yes, he's a problem for us. I think we can resolve this thing diplomatically with Pastor Bronson because of the president's pressure that he's placed on Erdogan. Erdogan is the problem that the Turkish economy has had serious problems. The president just exacerbated it by imposing a tariffs on aluminum and steel. The roots of it were already there, as we all know.
All right, General, always good catching up with you. Thank you very, very much.
Hey, good seeing you early in the morning here, Neil.
I don't know about that, but I do appreciate that, my friend. All right, we've got a lot more coming up, including boycotting Sam Adams, the beer, over supporting President Donald Trump. Wow. All right, the market's again unaffected by this latest charge out of London that the individual responsible for plowing into a crowd, or trying to, outside Parliament, has been arrested on a terrorist charge here. But again, the market's moving on despite all of that. We're following that. We're also following reports of yet another firefighter dying in that California wildfire. Cheryl Casone has more on that. Hey, Cheryl.
Yeah. Hey, Neil. The firefighter was from Utah. He was injured while working on the massive Mendocino complex fire. He has not been identified yet. These fires, though, are taking a very grim toll on our first responders. He is the 6th firefighter killed battling blazes in the state just this year. Well, Yosemite Valley and Yellowstone Park is set to reopen to tourists today after a 3-week closure. Of course, that closure has cost the park millions in lost revenue. The fire that roared through 150 square miles of the park is the largest ever in the Sierra National Forest. 2 firefighters died battling that blaze. Well, an Army Special Forces soldier killed in an IED explosion in Afghanistan. Sergeant First Class Raymond Transfiguration died 5 days after that blast occurred. Green Beret on patrol in Helmand province. The 36-year-old previously honored with the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. Well, you won't find the mayor of Somerville, Massachusetts, drinking Sam Adams beer. Joseph Curtatone says he is boycotting the beer after founder Jim Koch heaped praise on President Trump at a dinner in New Jersey last week. Now, Koch said that the Trump administration's tax cut plan will help his company compete with foreign breweries. Apparently, that was enough to turn Curtatone into a teetotaler. Alrighty then. And then finally, let's stay on the beer theme, because here's a story about a bear in search of a brewski. Yep, it's true. A bear in Bristol, Connecticut, apparently thirsty for an adult beverage, wandered into a liquor store yesterday. And it was caught on tape. The bear got through the front door, but a quick-thinking employee able to lock the inside door, preventing the bear from getting any further inside the store. A customer, by the way, Neil, actually walked right through the front door, unaware that he was standing right next to the bear, but he was, well, quickly brought inside. If the bear wants a beer, Neil, that's just what the bear wants. Can't argue with the bear.
You wouldn't argue there. You know, just whatever you want.
Yeah.
Go ahead and have it. Real quickly, guys, before we cut to a break here, I am interested in your thoughts on the Turkey situation. Again, the lira rebounding a little bit, 5 or 6% today, still down, really from its top levels, 40%. But what's going on here?
I think, maybe there's a pause in this run that we've had on the lira, but Turkey's problems aren't over, and we have to watch really carefully the negotiations to the extent there are any, between the U.S. and Turkey on this pastor. I think that's an important event for Turkey, how that gets resolved. It looks like Erdogan is digging his heels in, and that's just going to worsen problems for them.
Thinking of that, Lindsey, though, if you think about it, Erdogan and President Trump were best of buds, right? So this does prove, as the president's upping the sanctions against Russia, despite the so-called Vladimir Putin coziness, that he is quite capable of making his actions speak a lot louder than his words. But where's this all going?
Right, and there's global implications for that, too, as you're seeing in the currency market, for sure. Well, the Bank of International Settlement, they say, though, that the global exposure to loans in Turkey is less than 1%. So hopefully this can stay contained. But the banks, we started talking about that earlier, in Europe, some of the banks in Italy, Spain, and France, I think, have the greatest exposure. So that will be definitely an area to watch. But I think that the contagion concern should be limited.
The other really interesting angle here is, how does the president respond to weakening currencies? So there was a suggestion in his tweet that he was doubling the tariffs because the currency had come down so much, so he wanted to ramp up the effect of the tariffs. So, what happens if China's currency keeps going down? Do we ramp up our tariffs in China? What happens if the Canadian dollar softens against the U.S.? Do we find ways to ramp up, steel tariffs on the Canadians? This is an approach to currencies and tariffs that we don't usually see.
Yeah, because it has the flip side effect, right? It makes it better for them in their trading position.
Right, exactly.
Right.
All right, guys, thank you very much. We are looking at Tiger Woods. He didn't win this weekend, but he had one of his best performances in close to a decade. Why that has been joy for Golf TV ratings, we'll explain after this. All right, Tiger is back. You know, at first when I saw the results of the championship this past week, I thought Tiger had won, given all the coverage. He didn't, but he has done the best he has done in what, a decade, I guess. Jared Max is here with more on that and the fallout. A good fallout, right?
Yeah, good fallout, Neil. What an interesting story. Tiger Woods went from child prodigy to world golf superhero, and then he became a villain of sorts, but now he's on a comeback trail that it seems everybody wants to watch. By Tiger Woods contending for the top spot at the PGA Championship this weekend, TV ratings were their highest in 9 years for a final round at the PGA Championship, 69% higher than last year. Now, some have said, why so much coverage of Tiger? What about Brooks Koepka? He won the Wanamaker Trophy. Well, President Trump showed love yesterday, tweeting Brooks Koepka just won his third golf major, and he did it not only with his powerful game, but with his powerful mind. He has been a man of steel on the tour and will have many victories, including majors ahead of him. Congrats to Brooks and his great team on a job well done. 20-year-old Atlanta Braves rookie Ronald Acuna Jr. did something yesterday only 3 players had done before. He led off a doubleheader against the Marlins with his 16th home run of the year. Now, the Braves won the game 9-1. He would also be the leadoff hitter in the second game. Watch what happened.
Wouldn't mind another one here in Game 2 tonight. Sent out, rope hit to deep center on the first pitch. Can you believe it?
4 players ever have hit home runs in both games of a doubleheader to lead off 6-1. The Braves win that one, and they top the Phillies by 1 in the East. So, yeah, 4 guys. That's it. It's pretty amazing that Acuna Jr., this young star. Oh, and, you know, they don't call it Hot Atlanta for nothing. Marlins first base coach Perry Hill called on an old trick that Pete Rose taught him. When it's really warm and humid, you put lettuce on your head, under your hat, and it keeps your head cool. Anybody ever try this, the lettuce on the head? It works, I guess. Not only was Denver Broncos quarterback Paxton Lynch a first-round draft pick 2 years ago, booed off the field Saturday, he was also demoted to third-string quarterback, but then a Broncos fan started a GoFundMe page to raise $600,000 to give to the team so they could buy Lynch out of his contract. Ouch. The GoFundMe page was up last night, but now it's down. Oh, and hey, check out these new football uniforms for Air Force. It's the Air Force Power Legacy Series, and this year it honors the AC-130 aircraft. We get to see these alternate uniforms a lot of times, and these ones are shining for Air Force, ready for the college football season.
What is Tiger's next big tournament?
Hopefully the Ryder Cup. Yesterday, he did not get named as one of the automatics, but next month there are 4 more names who will go. So if it's U.S. against Europe, but the Masters next year, we set up here with this performance for what a cliffhanger for the first major next year. And he will win again, another major and more.
This is golf we're talking about?
That's a bold prediction. I mean, that would be how old is he now for him to come back?
Coming up on 43.
Right. So to come back and win a major at that age.
Care to make it interesting?
Yeah.
You want to bet?
I'll take that bet. I'll take that bet.
All right, guys. Thank you very
Maybe he'll
much.
do it with some lettuce on his head.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
I never knew that either.
I'm going to save a lot of
doesn't
money
breathe.
on air conditioning. I'm just going to sit around my apartment with lettuce on my head now.
Lettuce doesn't
I didn't
breathe.
want to go there. All right. Omarosa, the latest to tape Donald Trump. You had Michael Cohen doing the same thing. Why would people do that when they declare that they're your closest and bestest friend, and yet they keep taping him? It used to be, in my day, the presidents were taping people who visited him. Now it's the other way around. All right, we've got a lot more coming up after this.